He's basically Raiden. I don't know if we said this. I feel like after 100 episodes, we probably should have mentioned this part because we do a lot of crossovers of lore and stuff like that. If you know Mortal Kombat, Kennen is Raiden. Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 106, part 1. I'm your host, Ryan, here with the other host, Hedge.
And much like Mel Brooks, there is no part 2. This is just... Oh, wait, that's not even true anymore. Okay, yeah. There'll be a part 2. I'll allow it now.
Once again, dating ourselves. This is one of those special episodes, before we get into housekeeping, which is always up top, where we're breaking this one into 2 parts because this one deserves time. Not only are we excited, as always, to get in this stuff, since we're finally talking about the ninja world. We just had our Kennen episode, so if you listen to that one, that'll give you a little bit of insight here. This is where like a Kennen story would go. This story does have Kennen in it, but it does focus more on the broader ninja world in Ionia, which is on purpose as we get into further content. So we're breaking this one in 2 parts because it's very long. This is going to be a long one. So the first part the whole story is 12 sections to this story. So we're splitting into 2 parts, 6 sections per. A story is best told in 3 parts. So each part of each episode will have 2 sections worth of content. You get it. The math works out. Don't worry. We did it for you.
Yeah. Longtime listeners aren't going to be surprised that, like you said, a story is best told in 3 parts. And they're also not going to be surprised that before we jump into the story, we have to start up top. And what's up top?
The housekeeping, right? Where can you listen to us? Everywhere. That's the answer. Where can you email us? podcastcore@gmail.com. That's COR, not CORE. I know some people have been confused by that. So I don't know who's getting those emails. I'm sorry. As far as our info, you can find it all at podcastcore, same spelling.com. And then you can find us on any platform and follow us there. Or follow us on all the platforms because that helps with discoverability. We appreciate it. Leave comments, reviews, but the easiest way is word of mouth. So tell a friend to pass the time during another useless work meeting by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
Oh, it's too true. Work meetings are always useless. And if you've accidentally emailed Podcast Core, CORE, go ahead and shoot them back another email and tell them to listen to us too. Word of mouth, baby.
Word of mouth, baby. So let's hit the ground running with Nike's Ninja Edition. This main topic is the Bow and the Kunai. That will be explained more as we tell the story. And we start with part 1. So once again, this is a long one, but we start with a story following a character we don't know, who's Faye, a 12-year-old Kinku novice hunting for a silver boar with her fellow novices around her age. She is on the older side. I think there's one kid who's 13 in this group, but bunch of rambunctious kids running around, and they hope to succeed in this little self-given mission so they can prove that, they can now level up in the Kinku order and become actual acolytes. That's their goal. Because at this point in the story, the Kinku have recently endured attacks, right? We're at the point post-Noxus invasion. We're at the point post-Zed doing his thing and killing off some folks. So they're in a rough spot. We're at the low of this specific Kinku order. So listen to our Swain and our Irelia episodes and stuff like that for more info.
Yeah. We do cover it a lot in our other Ionia episodes, especially like our Shin and Zed episodes.
Yeah.
But the main thing to remember is that these kids are hunting this boar while the Kinku order is essentially at its lowest point. So quick second for spoilers. If you haven't listened to those episodes, second over. So this is this is after we have Shin's dad killed by Zed, and we also have, which we didn't really get to cover until we were covering Kennen's story, we have a new Fist of Shadow who is Mame, and the previous Fist of Shadow was also killed during Zed's betrayal. So that's where we're at right now. And so these kids want to prove themselves because they feel like they have to. Which is a
Yeah,
rough
and
spot to be in.
that I'm happy you brought that up because the ideal was supposed to be, obviously due to Shen and Zed coming up together, Zed would have been the new Fist of Shadow, right? Obviously, that didn't work out, which has led to this imbalance. And if you listen to Kennan's episode, obviously leading into this, you understand why that balance is so important. And not only are they off balance, they're still being invaded, right? There's skirmishes still happening around the island that we'll get into, or not the general space. And it's not just one realm either, it's two realms, right? The spirit and the mortal. So obviously this is causing many of the Kinku Order, so the people that are left, even some of those people are just losing faith in the mission, right? And just leaving on their own volition. So their numbers are weakened. So we focus back on these kids that are in their own little bubble and they're chasing this boar and it bursts from the spirit realm. So it's a spirit boar that's traveling between both realms and it begins heading towards these children. They try to bait it and guide it according to this plan that Faye came up with. And before Faye could deliver the killing blow with her bow and arrow, which is her main weapon, a girl leaps from the shadows, hopping on the back of the boar and swinging a rope, trying to get it around its head. And it keeps bucking around. And we find out that this girl is Akali, a young Akali, the youngest of the group, and she ruins Faye's plan.
And I love seeing this side of Akali because, especially for longtime League of Legends players, this isn't something we get to see too much as far as just Akali being a rambunctious kid.
Mm.
But it is interesting that the boar that they're hunting is out of the spirit realm. So I like there's a lot like kind of already crammed in here because it's like, oh, like should they be doing this? Like
Yeah.
Hunger will drive men to do crazy things, and kids are already, prone to be problematic. So this is already a stretch. So it may be a good thing Akali's jumped in like a wild lad, but like, hey, like let's see what happens to Akali here.
Yeah, balance is a main concept here, and things happen for a reason. But sometimes those reasons are unknown by everyone involved. It's kind of the theme of what's going on. So we have the boar come in, it bucks Akali off and gets away. Faye runs over this 9-year-old. I mean, they're about 3 years apart, I believe, and starts, telling her, "You ruined the plan. You weren't supposed to follow us. You're too young to be out here with us." And Akali kind of shrugs it off, and she's like, "Well, I was just trying to help. It didn't work out, but I'll give you some of my plums at dinner as an apology." Because to her, that will make up for it, right?
Yeah.
Because she doesn't have the same view as these older kids who are actually trying to become a part of like the military, right? They're trying to prove something. Akali's just trying to have fun.
Yeah, and also like I've got a couple nieces, and one of them's at the toddler age, and there's always a time in a kid's life where they just want to help.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is that they're what it is you're doing, and it doesn't matter if you tell them no, they're still going to try to help.
Mhm.
So that's it's nice to see that Akali, even though she was having the time of her life jumping on this boar and riding it like a bucking bronco, uh, that she was still like, well, my ultimate goal was to help. Like I knew that y'all were doing something for everybody here, so I want to help. You didn't tell me to help, but I'm gonna help anyways.
Yeah.
Like some kids are just like that.
I'm
So
taking initiative.
yeah, like I see it as just being childlike here, which is
Oh, of course. Yeah.
we got to enjoy it now because it's not gonna last. it's
Oh
it's
my
not gonna
God.
last.
And this is what's going to this is the children aspect of it is very important to Kennan's side of this story, which we'll get into in a bit, just because of how long he's been around and how he's essentially like the wise old man, despite being, a young looking squirrel dude. But a little more about the time frame. So this time frame is after Zed's attacks on the Kinku, but it's not just his order attacking these smaller groups. There are remaining members that are also taking this opportunity to uh, to take over certain groups, to assimilate certain groups by force, and to also prey on weakness. They have their own Noxus like motivations. But
Mm.
this group is specifically in the abandoned temple east of Thanjul, in high in the mountains, in this lagoon area, and that's where they're hiding out. And these hostile factions don't actually know where they're at. And because you're looking at, Shen, Mame, and the main group of leaders in this area, them being hidden from everybody is a good thing, especially in this weakened state. So when kids are playing and just being kids, it it's a little bit more dangerous in the situation because there's not really room for them to be noticed just having fun. So there has to be more, they have to be reined in a bit more than most kids would be.
Yeah, and as far as like the geographical location here, if you take if you want to take a moment to look at the map of Runeterra, you can see that where the this monastery is at is pretty much like in the middle of the mountain range that separates the civilization of Ionia, which is on the western side of the mountains,
Mhm.
into just almost uncharted lands,
Yeah,
essentially. Like there's nothing past them. So they are as far away from civilization as Ionians really have ever been. Which makes it a lot harder because they it's a fractured group that has suffered a giant loss, who is away from society, that's also trying to maintain balance within wartime, which is already super hard to do, but they have to take care of kids on top of all that, which is
exactly.
why these kids get the chance to just go out and try to kill a spirit boar. Like, yeah, who's watching them? Like,
Exactly. So Faye's group, naturally, they return. They get scolded by Mame. She finds out about them, their foolish actions, which could have exposed the order, like we mentioned. And then Faye immediately takes full responsibility because we find out she is Mame's apprentice. And Mame gladly lays into her and kind of, doubles down on her irresponsibility. So next to Faye is Akali looking guilty, right? As a young troublemaker would look. But Mame kind of dismisses all their excuses, and her punishment is like, okay, no dinner tonight, which means that plum thing kind of works out in Faye's favor if Akali's able to get her or pay what she owes. But that night, uh, Mame tells Faye to walk with her and to have a good talking to because since Faye is looked like Mame knows Faye is the leader of the group, so all the details and the nuance, especially as her apprentice, she's saving for her rather than the whole group.
right. And this is going to be like a very critical like learning point for Faye, because, again, we just pointed out that, nobody's watching these kids. So Mame is trying to really use this as a chance to, have Faye be the one watch these kids. Because it's like, hey, they already listen to you, even though you're not the oldest.
Yeah.
But since they already listen to you and they already follow you, just please listen to what I say
Yeah.
so that I could deal with all of the bull crap that's happening
Mame's trying to
around
work
us.
smarter, not harder.
Yeah, like, so, props to her. I do find it interesting that she like, and it doesn't come up again, but I find it interesting she still punishes everybody.
Yeah.
Which I like, it's honestly probably still the right move, instead of just, like, oh, you took responsibility, then you're the only one who doesn't eat.
Yeah.
It probably is still the right move. It's just like, yeah, y'all all still messed up though. Like, just because the leader is the one that took you there, somebody's got to step up and say, hey, no, we shouldn't do this. So I found that interesting, but
Yeah.
it's cool. It's cool to see that, it's like, hey, like, all of this turmoil is kind of building up. It was here, and they're layering it in really well in the story.
Exactly. Oh, they're taking their time. This is, like we said, it's a long one, so obviously they take their time to tell the story properly. Because this is a big basis. I mean, it's taken us so long. It's taken us hundreds of episodes to get here, or over 100 episodes, because
Yep.
this is a big key for all the other stuff we're going to talk about when we talk about the Kinku Order, the Navari Brotherhood, and all that. Um,
Yep.
so I'm happy that we finally got here.
Me too. So
So
excited.
they start taking a walk, and Faye, bold choice, is now trying to convince Mame to just initiate the young group to full members. And Mame's like, "What the hell? You're in trouble. What are you doing? This is not a time to do your elevator pitch." Mame does acknowledge that they're capable immediately, but reminds her that patience is a virtue, and that serves here as it does in many cultures in the real world. And then she informs her that the current imbalance of the mortal and spiritual realm is due to not only in external conflicts for Ionia, but also internal, and it's a balancing act times two. So, Faye never really thought about this. She knew what their current situation is, their part of the order is in, but she's not really skilled enough or at the level of insight where she's able to balance all of these concepts in her mind. And this becomes a theme later on.
Yeah, and it is one of the interesting points
She's
here
12,
that
right?
yeah, like she's a kid. But one of the interesting things it's like, hey, yeah, like there's a lot that you don't understand yet, which is why we're still trying to take our time. Is that the in their conversation, Faye even says, we were told it is okay to hunt the boar.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but that was when we first got here. And now we're learning that it's not okay. So, like, it's a chance for Faye to learn that it's like, hey, the adults are still figuring it out just as much as we are, which, like, hasn't really sunk into her yet.
Yeah.
But also, like, kind of highlighting just the amount of spiritual turmoil that's happening within all of Ionia. So that it's like the things that were understood are now in flux. And another cool thing with this scene is that we get to see that the monastery had been there for like a really, really long time.
Yeah.
So they're walking into like a water garden, but they're walking on like old statues that have time lost to memory, which is really cool because it might be something that we get to talk about later when we go deeper into like the living weapons and stuff, when we talk about the guys that have been there for time immemorial.
Exactly. So at the end of this exchange, Faye's starting to realize her place, and she silently disagrees with some of her master's points, especially emphasis on taking it slow, but she remains respectful. Mame then finishes by assuring her that you have what it takes. That's not the question. It's just it takes time. And she expects her to fully replace Mame as the Fist of Shadow at some point, as Mame has only recently replaced Zed because of the thing he did. And this excites Faye. It keeps her. She's ambitious, but she still has a fear that there may not be a Kinku order at that time, which is why she's rushing things. It's this constant fear of losing everything again, which once again is another big theme. And this is what takes us into part 2 of our story.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that we do get a little bit of growth within this conversation alone because, it went from starting off with, yeah, you're in trouble, but you're still giving me the elevator pitch of, just promote all the kids already.
Yeah.
And then she's like already within this conversation learning like, okay, now is not the time to tell Mame I disagree with her. Just like, I'll sit on it for right now. And
So yeah. So our story then shifts to Akali in the second part, and she's in calligraphy. Oh my gosh, calligraphy class. I know, right? And subconsciously, it's about, especially for the younger group, it's about learning virtues subconsciously, which she despises all the Kinku virtues because it doesn't allow her to have fun. Suddenly, we get our man of the hour. Kennen appears at the door, and excited Akali starts to begin to chase him. Just runs out of class. Naturally, she's unable to catch him, but he plays with her a bit, and they stop to rest at a tree trunk. And this leads to a discussion between him and Akali. And Akali first asked him about Shen, right, following his recent loss. So we now know that, we've been harping on it, but his dad just died. Kusho was his father, and he just died. So even though he's also now become, the leader, quote unquote, of this Kinku order, he's going through his own things, and Akali, even though being so young, is able to recognize that very early.
yeah, and even with this conversation, we get to see like the thought process Akali's going through, where she doesn't really understand it at first, and then she starts putting pieces together to help her understand it, which is nice. But I also I can't believe I'm going to say this. Okay, I can't believe I'm going to say this.
Mhm.
So it's very much against my
I know it's
nature.
coming. I've been planning on this.
You
Say it.
you monster.
Fucking
But
say
it was really refreshing to see Kennen playing with Akali here because Kennen is such a tight ass. and then it's like, oh right, he is still a Yordle.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh yeah, like this kid's pretty fast. Yeah, let's play a game of tag.
You heard it here first. Yordles are all the same. That's Hedge's words, not mine. So yeah, Kennen is a Yordle, which means he's been around a long time, but he is super wise. And he's not just a Yordle; he's a Yordle that's been in Ionia the majority of his life. So he's talking to Akali in a way that works for Akali. There's a reason this is juxtaposed next to what we just had Mame and Faye having their discussion for a purpose. So when Ken's talking to Akali, he brings up like the incident with the boar, which leads Akali to kind of question why her mother, who is Mame, focuses so much on Faye instead of her. And then Kennen, being the wise person he is, he kind of gives her perspective between her losing her father, who was also killed by Zed, and then Faye losing both of her parents. And her mother, specifically, was Mame's best friend. So you're already starting to get the complex family dynamic that's happening here. And this helps Akali begin to truly understand all the pain and loss everyone is going through, not just her as a 9-year-old. Because I lost one, she lost two, right? That to her, she's able to put those two pieces together. But Kennen reassures her that in due time, she will become a great member of the order, just like everyone else, and worthy of her mother's praise. And then he tells her, okay, get back to class. I have to go to a boring meeting. I don't know, Zoom, Discord, but he has to head off to that. And he just disappears because he's Kennen, right? He's always doing it in style. He's basically Raiden. I don't know if we said this. I feel like after 100 episodes, we probably should have mentioned this part because we do a lot of crossovers of lore and stuff like that. If you know Mortal Kombat, Kennen is Raiden. I'm sorry.
I mean, he is straight up Raiden.
Like, we forgot to tell you that part.
Hey, you know what? I'm putting the blame on you because you're the big fighting game fan. All right, like I'm just a casual. I'm a filthy casual. All right, you take the fighting game seriously. but yeah, no. It's great to get like the breakdown of the family dynamics here because like as far as for the readers, like it's really putting that into perspective better for us. But we also get to see, we also kind of get to see like the beginning of what we read in Kennen's bio because we know from Kennen's bio that Kennen was very much in favor of Akali being the successor of the Shadow Fist, and I like to see that as far as that it's not being ham-fisted in here. He's being very subtle about it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you're playing a game of tag with a ninja, and not only just a ninja, but you're playing a game of tag with freaking Raiden, who's just gonna like lightning teleport himself across like just all the lands. Like, yeah, like you're probably pretty freaking fast if that's like your way of having fun. So it makes sense that it's like, yeah, like let her do some killing too. Like, she can almost keep up with me. Like, yeah, let her go.
Yeah, this another we're gonna keep saying it. This becomes a theme too of Kennen kind of slowly pushing the as far as NFL drafts are coming up. He's like, how about this player, right? That kind of thing. And this takes us directly to the meeting, right? Which is cool to see. And the meeting in question takes place. Naturally, it's a bunch of overpowered ninjas at the peak of a mountain summit. And
of course, we have seen Japanese media.
And as it stands, it's currently just Kennen, Mame, and Mame decided to bring Faye along so she can see how this all happens at the top level. And they're trying to decide the next course of action. So naturally, based on their positions, Mame is pushing for action while Kennen is focusing on restraint in these trying times. And as Faye's observing, she's trying to focus on what's going on, even though not much is happening besides an argument in her eyes, and trying not to freeze to death because she mentions, I don't get how they have the fortitude to not only have a very serious discussion, but in these weather conditions.
and I love that because there's already like we already have like the super campy feel of the overpowered ninjas at the top of a mountain.
Yeah,
but like Shin doesn't wear sleeves. Kennen is just like in a pajamas.
Yeah,
and top of a mountain's freaking cold. So at least like there's one person at the top of this mountain that's being human here, and just like what? How the hell are they doing this?
So we have them going back and forth, and Faye is kind of watching this, obviously fatigued, but she's intrigued that when Mame is dealing with her peers versus her, she's usually telling Faye to be restrained, right? To wait, to have patience. But when it's a meeting time, her position is always to push for action and proactive resolution. And Kenan mentions that his trump card in this discussion is that, oh no, I already checked out what's going on. There's Noxian soldiers that are obviously a threat. There's Ionian defenders who reluctantly are banding together. There's Vestaya involved, which that surprised me, and they're uncertain on where their allegiance falls, which is another interesting point. And then there's spies everywhere. Everyone has fucking spies. So this puts him at a standstill where Mame's obviously shocked that he has this information, but she also knows it's Kenan, so he's able to do these covert missions without anyone noticing. But then they are like, okay, well, how about we get insight from the third party? Where the fuck is the Eye of Twilight?
Yeah. And it is funny because again, like, May knows not to doubt the information Kennan's given because
Mhm.
Kennan's just Raiden. And you don't
Exactly.
doubt the God of Thunder. You don't doubt the God of Thunder.
Yeah.
It is nice to see though that the Vestaya are involved because obviously it is still the lands of Ionia, and we know from reading like the end of Ari's bio is that there's a unrest amongst the Vestaya, and maybe that's her outlet to try to find out answers about her memory loss
Mhm.
and to find the rest of her tribe. But this means that it's like pretty early on into the conflict of Noxus and Ionia that the Vestaya were already getting involved. Like, because of the other stories we've gotten so far has been a thing of like the Vestaya have just been very patient. Of just
Yeah.
like, okay, keep killing us. But no, that wasn't the case.
So Shen arrives in a very subdued manner. Like it's already an extreme scene. So no cinematography happening here. He's just there. And Faye essentially rolls her eyes the moment he arrives because she knows they were already indecisive. Nothing's getting done. Mame continues to push her point, but alas, Shen kind of sits on the fence. He's in the middle, and he's also recently joined his position. That's the other part. The only person that's senior right now is Kenan. Keep that in mind. And that's just because of
Yeah.
how old Kenan is. The other two have just been promoted to their executive positions. So they're
Promoted
still
against
figuring
their
it out.
will.
Go ahead. Say that.
They were promoted against their will.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
In the worst way possible because of death and destruction and
Yep.
imbalance. And Shen decides, after all this time, drumroll, to meditate again because he came from meditation. And Akali Faye called it. She was like, "This dude is useless."
Yeah. In Shin's defense, before he says that he's going to meditate on it,
Yeah.
Shin does mention that part of his meditation is that he's trying to remove his own personal feelings towards Zed and what has happened within the Kinku order itself. He's trying to remove himself from that because he's realizing that Zed is now in his own way restoring balance specifically in the physical realm of Ionia.
Yeah.
Because Zed was very much against the idea of the Kinku doing nothing when the Noxian invaders came in. So, yeah, he killed a bunch of Kinku on his way out, but Zed is also kind of killing everybody.
Yeah.
So, Shin is realizing that it's like, hey, it might not be such a bad idea to not go after Zed. And Kenan lets him say that point and then looks at Mame and says, again, to my point, it's complicated. So Kenan kind of agrees with him that Zed is playing his role, whether they like it or not. And so it makes sense if you think of it in that way that you've got to meditate on it. But especially for a brash kid who is desperately trying to get promoted into adult work, that is definitely like, oh, of course Shen's doing nothing.
Yeah.
We should be killing people. We're the Kinku. Let's go kill people.
All this ninja for what? What do we have all this
Shen
agility for?
Yeah, Shen is still the worst ninja.
He's still the worst ninja in action and tank. So this is also supposed to be a point where we see. Obviously, we just got the perspective of how Akali, another young child, sees Shen versus how Faye sees Shen and his position. And we even get some internal from Faye here where she's thinking back to how when they grow up, they they keep an eye on how a child's progressing in one of those 3 disciplines and try to push them towards that side. Obviously, if Mame's meant to be the apprentice to Faye, she's being the apprentice for the purpose of becoming a Fist of Shadow, which means she would want to push action. So her view of Shen is not going to be positive, right? Because that's a different order. That's a different way of thinking than what she's literally been raised to think.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of weird because it doesn't make sense that Mame is trying to really rein in Faye while she is very much just not reining herself in at all.
Yeah.
Because like it's not a thing of like she's walking away from this meeting with a better understanding of why they're doing nothing. She's walking away from this meeting like that was a huge waste of time.
Yeah.
And with for Faye walking away from that, saying it's a huge waste of time, perfectly fine. Mame, who's the one trying to encourage restraint, she should not be walking away from that saying it was a waste of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's you can see her frustration leaking, which is part of it. This is all on purpose, guys. This story is very well written.
Yes, it is. It's very well written. It's all on purpose.
Yeah, we'll get to where this all comes back around. But they decide Shen's still sitting up there, thinking about things. So they just start heading down the mountain. And Mame kind of openly but respectfully kind of mentions, maybe the apple did fall a bit far from the tree when it came to Master Kusho versus Shen. And Kennen immediately kind of makes a nod of, hey, chill with that, because if you can jump to the conclusion that sometimes the blood does not transfer properly to the next to the child, so that they have the same power as the master, you're a case in which that wasn't the issue. Like, you have as much potential as your parents. So don't just
Cough, cough,
immediately cross
Akali.
him off because he disagrees with you, because him disagreeing with you is part of the whole job. And he doesn't do so lightly. And that's on top of the fact that he too is a human like us, part of the order, part of his family, and he has lost someone very important to him, or lost 2 people, his father and his best friend.
Yeah. And it's also like this is such a nice and well written remark from Kennen, because it's also a nudge of like, hey, if you know what, let's assume you're right and Shin did fall far from the family tree. We know someone who didn't fall far from the family tree,
Mhm.
and that's Akali.
Yeah.
And we know that Kenning is trying to push for Mame to take Akali under her wing, not Faye.
Yeah.
So this was such a well written remark here, and which it's good that they have it well written, because Kennen's supposed to be the wisest one out of all of them,
Exactly.
because he's been around the longest, in like a really long time. So yeah, like that little conversation with them walking away from the meeting is so cool.
Yeah.
Even though nothing happens.
Yeah, like all meetings. So if you remember our intro, there you
Yeah.
go. So this takes us to part 3. We start to wrap this up. And Faye returns to find Akali waiting for her in her pajamas, given to her by her father. Remember, her father, Mame's husband, passed away during Zed's attacks. And Akali hands her a plum that she promised, Faye. And Faye's kind of confused because Akali also wasn't allowed to have dinner. How does she have plums? And Faye notices that she's afraid of not like she's kind of shaking during this interaction, but she's also afraid of food being taken from them, or them having to run again and not having enough and having to start from scratch. So she's been storing food, and this is a way for her to see this young child's anxiety and how that relates to Faye's confusion about all the bigger things that she's trying to, comprehend as well. And Akali reveals to her openly that she's afraid the bad people will return and that they may have to escape again. And she doesn't want to be torn apart from the little family she has left, which is very understandable for her to feel this way. Because remember, Akali recently had a talk with Kennen. So now her thoughts are more concise and she understands better how she feels. And this kind of starts to bring tears to Faye's eyes, but Faye holds back and immediately turns that into anger. This becomes another theme. And, Faye, frustrated that she still doesn't understand all the moving pieces the adults are talking about, tells Akali, go to bed, gives her a long hug, which is another thing you should remember. uh, and then,
Yeah.
lets some tears fall a bit from her eye
Yeah. For anyone
without
out there
Akali
who
noticing.
Yeah. For anyone out there who really likes what me and my brother refer to as the genre of children in peril, we're about to really dig into there. Because already these kids are dealing with a lot of heavy issues and the losses of a lot of very important people in their lives. And yeah, just remember that. Just remember that. And on to the next.
Correction, sorry, she didn't let the tear fall. She sucked it back in. What's that? Is it Pixar or DreamWorks where it's like the cop dude and he's like, oh, that brings a tear to my eye and it's starting to come out. He's like, get back in there, and he sucks it back up.
Yeah, I think I want to say it was Pixar. It was Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs.
That's what it was. Yes,
is what that is from.
that's
I
the
can't
scene
remember
that
if
came
that's
to my mind
DreamWorks, so.
immediately.
Yeah, get back in there.
So this moves to the next day. Faye's practicing archery, and she kind of has some alone time with herself. This is how she distracts herself from this feeling of hopelessness with everything related to the Kinku. Mame is currently on a mission, and Kennen is standing guard in the lagoon while he's also playing with Akali. So Akali's taken care of. He has her interest. And Hiso, one of Faye's friends, part of that original kid group, tells her, hey, come play with us in the Southern Valley. Faye knows that's a big no-no. We shouldn't go there because Mame doesn't want us there. And Hiso reminds her, that's why we're going. She's not around. That's the reason we're going. So against her better judgment, she says, all right, I'll join you, but after I'll finish my practice for today. And, there's some adult decision making there.
I like tell me this is a Japanese inspired story without telling me it's a Japanese inspired story. And this is the scene that would take it in, which is they just got reprimanded for being dumb kids. As soon as mom is gone, they're going to be dumb kids again.
Yep.
And then what makes it Japanese? Okay, yeah, we can be dumb kids again. But first, I must finish my club activities. Like, what the hell?
So as she's thinking about this, archery for her is like every day for Shen. It's meditative, right? This is when she has time to be with herself. And she talks about or thinks about, and this is where we get some insight into how they view combat versus the meditation process of weaponry use in the Kinku practice known as Neo and Niar. So she always struggles with Neo, which is the meditative process, that aspect. And due to her constant wandering mind, this makes it even more of a thing. And what we're starting to get more of a sense of is something that we all know about: ADHD mixed with anxiety. These two parts start to become very clear in certain children, right? And certain characters in the story. And it's obvious that Faye's struggling throughout this is making that apparent. And I never thought we would have a Star Guardian callback.
Yeah.
But if you listen to Star Guardian, we do talk a lot about Lux's character and how this kind of plays into the overarching scheme of a lot of characters, where you can look at it and be like, oh, they have anxiety, right?
Yep.
Which makes sense in what they're currently dealing with.
And let's all just take a moment to be very grateful that Faye is not a member of the Star Guardians.
Yeah.
That would be an exhausting episode.
There's already enough angst in that team rom-com, right? We don't need any more.
100%.
So all these issues are making it harder for her to concentrate on what she's doing, and that's coming through with her performance. So she's struggling to hit the target because her mind is racing through these frustrations. Then she finally takes a deep breath, remembers Mame, remembers what Master Kusho told her when she was younger, and she's able to clear her mind, and she hits the target gracefully and continues to hit the target. And she can feel her mind organizing things and clearing up. And she's starting to find her own answers to these questions.
Yeah, and it is nice to see as far as this growth within Faye, because this is something that we really needed to see leading into this next part of the story.
Yeah.
Which like I think that like if we didn't have this next part of the story isn't going to make a lot of sense. As far as just like how the hell are they going to do it? But it is really, it's just so crazy to see that it's just like immediately the next day after they didn't get to eat dinner for being dumb kids, they're gonna go be dumb kids. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, her I would say just go read at least like this section of the story of her really having that inner turmoil with herself. Like this is really well written.
Yeah, yeah. So she completes her practice like she planned on, but after she's cleared her mind, she's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't go play in the valley and probably tell them to come back, but I don't want them waiting for me until night. So I'm gonna go let them know. So she no longer feels like participating in the game. She starts heading out there, but when she arrives, no one is there. She can't see anything, no one is visible, and she has this feeling that something is not right. So she readies her bow because she has it on her. Remember, she was just at practice, and suddenly she hears a whistle. That's good. It was the group, but they're all well hidden and in silence. They're kind of grouped up. And one of them points in a direction and she follows where they're pointing. And there's 20 warriors with tiger tattoos that we know about. And they're kind of just scouting around and looking around. We'll talk more about how their behavior is different from how it used to be. Like they don't treat things with respect. So they're just hacking and slashing plants. They're making themselves visible because they think nothing is around here. And these people are a part of the Navori Brotherhood.
And the way they write the Navori Brotherhood here is so well done, especially if you follow a lot of like Asian media, because one of the reasons that a lot of Asian cultures do not really look lightly upon tattoos is that tattoos were traditionally used to mark criminals.
Yes.
So it's like criminals would use tattoos as a way of like having their uniform, right? Yeah. So it's like if your ink was right, I knew which side of the fence you were on. So the use of them here for the Navori is really good, and it's a great Asian touch of like, yeah, these are bad guys.
Exactly, and that's where we leave off. Obviously on a cliffhanger. What's going to happen next? So this is part one. We flew through this one. I know it doesn't feel like it, and thanks if you made it to the end of this episode. But the consolation prize is that you won't have to wait the full, we release every week on Cadence. This one will be followed by part two very soon after. So you'll have this one a couple days later, you'll have the next one. So keep an eye out for that. For now, though, thanks for listening. And we'll be back soon with part two of this.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Yeah, imagine if we did this all in one thing and be like a 2-hour episode. Oh, God, we'd get canceled. All right, well, take care, everybody.